What I want to do is do a thought experiment to examine how we can understand what's going on between the United States and Iran, okay? And the thought experiment is this. Let's just say that there's a bully, okay? And he's the biggest guy in the school. And he has a gang, okay? These are his friends. And there's like maybe 4 of them. What they do is they basically prey on everyone at the school, okay? And there's maybe 100 people at the school. They make everyone in the cafeteria pay a tax. Maybe $1, who knows, okay? And the friends of the bully go collect the tax and then give him all the money, okay? And that is the structure of the school. Now, at first, people are okay with the system because they think that it's actually beneficial because the bully is keeping the peace and order in the cafeteria, right? He's keeping everyone safe. So yeah, I pay $1, but it's not that much money. And we're all safe so that we can all enjoy our lunch in peace in the cafeteria, okay? But then what happens over time is that the bully gets more and more arrogant because he feels invincible. Everyone just obeys him. So he develops the idea of hubris. And the idea of hubris is that no one has the courage to challenge me. Everyone's afraid of me, and therefore I can do whatever I want. So what does he do? Well, the first thing he does is that he charges more money. So the tax goes up. And so people are disgruntled about this. But not only that, but what he will also do is pay less money to his friends so that he can have more money because he wants to buy a car or he wants to go to Paris for the summer. Okay, so everyone's not happy about this, but this is the reality that they live in, and there's nothing they can do about it. One day, a new kid comes into the school, okay? And he doesn't really understand the rules of the game. He goes to the cafeteria, and he doesn't know he's supposed to pay a tax, right? So the bully's friend comes over and says, hey man, where's $1? And he's like, what dollar? I just got here. And he refuses to pay. And so what they decide to do is teach him a lesson by ostracizing him, by making him sit alone by himself in the cafeteria. Okay, you have no friends because you don't know the rules and you refuse to play along. And the new kid is like, I don't care. Then the bully and his friends start to discuss, how can we get this new kid to play along? And so they decide what they're gonna do is they're gonna bully him, okay? So the new kid goes to lunch and he's eating his lunch, and the friends come down and start to curse him, says, you're a wimp, do you wanna fight us? And what the new kid does is he just ignores these guys. And slowly what happens is that the other people, the other kids, recognize that, wow, maybe it is possible to rebel against the bully. And so they start talking to him secretly. And then the friends are like, you know what? We don't actually benefit this much from this relationship anyway. And then you have other friends who are like, you know what? This bully, he's fat, he's ugly. Maybe I should be the boss, okay? So just because a new kid comes in, doesn't know the rules, and he's willing to challenge the reality, now there's dissent. Now there's rebellion going on. And then eventually, the bully gets so pissed off that he punches the new kid in the face, okay? So he started it. The new kid, he's hurt, but he decides to punch the bully back in the face, okay? And the bully's stronger, so he beats the bully up. So he beats up the new kid. But what's happened now is that everyone in the school has seen that the bully is not that strong. And so they recognize that, hey, if we stand alongside the new kid, we can beat the bully. And eventually what happens is the bully is defeated. Okay, so that's a theory, all right? So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna apply this theory, the law of escalation, to what's happening in the Middle East. This is the US, this is Iran. So let's look at their escalation ladder. So the first thing the United States does, of course, is something called decapitation. What is decapitation? Decapitation is like, I just kill your leaders, you don't have any more leaders, and therefore you don't know what to do, and therefore you surrender, okay? It didn't work. So now what the United States is doing is attacking military targets, air defense, and military bases, okay? That's the second step. And the idea is that you beat the crap out of the military so they surrender. But that didn't work either, okay? So then what you do next, of course, is economic embargo, where you basically prevent Iran from trading with the world, prevent Iran from selling oil to China, basically, by blockading the seas. And the idea here is that if the government doesn't have any money to pay its soldiers will just not fight. But that's not working either. So then what you do, of course, is you attack civilian infrastructure, which is primarily water and oil. So you may have seen the news that the Israelis attacked an oil depot in Tehran. And now if you look at a picture of Tehran, it's all black, okay? And this is a war crime, or this goes against international law because you're attacking civilians. That's what you do when you feel as though you need to apply more pressure to win this war, okay? And so you can keep on escalating. And then what you do is that now that you've attacked the civilians and they still refuse to surrender, what you do now is you use secret weapons. Secret weapons might be advanced missiles that no one's ever seen before. The point of these secret weapons is to scare the crap out of people and say, you see how dominant we are, okay? If that doesn't work, then what you do next is use biological and chemical weapons. Doesn't work either? Then, guys, nuclear weapons. What's really important for us to understand is that you must follow this escalation ladder if you are to use nuclear weapons. And the reality is that, first of all, we have not seen secret weapons. We have not seen biochemical weapons, and therefore, nuclear weapons comes later, okay? Unless I see biochemical weapons being used, I refuse to believe that nuclear weapons is on the table, okay? So we are at this stage, meaning that we have a long way to go before we hit nuclear weapons. So now let's look at the Iranian escalation ladder. So what's happening is that in the beginning, Iran does two major things, okay? The first is attack military targets, okay? And what they're basically targeting are US radar systems and air defenses. Because once these two things go, then Iran can attack whatever it wants, okay? It's also close to Strait of Hormuz. And by closing the Strait of Hormuz, you put pressure on the economies of the GCC, as well as East Asia. The hope is that by blockading the economies, the GCC, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait will put pressure on Donald Trump to end this war as quickly as possible. Also, East Asia receives most of its oil from the GCC, from the Strait of Hormuz, right? So China gets about 40% of its oil, Japan gets 75%. That's a lot of oil. So the hope is that these countries will put pressure on the United States. But if they're forced to go up the escalation ladder, what will happen is this. If you attack their economy, they will attack your economy as well, okay? With missiles, basically targeting oil fields. And what is the main weakness in these GCC countries? Desalination plants, okay? Desalination plants. And that's it, okay? That's the extent of the Iranian escalation ladder. Because it doesn't have nuclear weapons. It doesn't have intercontinental missiles that it can target the United States with. So, as you can see, the US and Israel have escalation dominance because they can go way up higher in the escalation ladder than Iran. But that's the wrong way to understand this. Because if you look at their strategies, Iran has much more flexibility than the United States, okay? When the United States attacks you, it's pretty blunt. But look, if I close off the Strait of Hormuz, I can be strategic in how I close the Strait of Hormuz. For example, if you're a Chinese ship, I'll let you pass. For example, if you are a GCC nation and you want to bribe me, if you want to pay me a tax, I'll let you pass as well. If you're a GCC nation and you're like, you know what, forget the United States, I want to be a friend of Iran, I'll let you pass as well. It allows Iran to selectively and strategically apply pressure to the friends of the United States so that they become the friends of Iran, okay? Same thing with these drone strikes against oil fields and military targets. If you attack me, I attack you with drones. But if you don't attack me, then I don't attack you. So in other words, okay, this is a really important idea. The US and Iran have different military decision trees. So let me explain how. Because the United States and Israel, they're just attacking Iran, okay? And they attack with air power, so that's very blunt. You go from one step to the next, to the next, to the next, okay? This is the classic escalation ladder. Iran is not like this. Their decision tree is different. Because their strategy is to force the United States to admit defeat and retreat, okay? To close down the military bases in the Middle East so that Iran has control over the Strait of Hormuz and therefore it can control all world trade. So this strategy means that you have different options. Iran can be much more selective in its targeting than the United States and Israel, which gives Iran escalation control over the situation. So let's look at why Iran has advantages over the escalation ladder, okay? The first major difference is that Iran is active, whereas the US is passive. Okay? Another thing this is, go back to the bully example where the bully has to maintain credibility. He has to show that he's more powerful than the other kids, right? So if you provoke him, he has no choice in the matter but to hit you. But you, the new kid, can choose whether or not to provoke him or not. You can choose the timing of when to provoke him. Therefore, you are active. The second big difference is that Iran has a clear strategy. It knows what it wants to accomplish and it knows how to accomplish what it wants. Remember, what Iran wants is control of the Strait of Hormuz and the United States out of the Middle East. The United States, on the other hand, doesn't know what it wants. It wants to destroy Iran. But what does that mean, okay? It could mean regime change. It could mean economy collapses. It could mean the civilian population starves, okay? It can mean anything. But because there's so much ambiguity, so much confusion about what it means, it confuses military strategy. The last thing is, of course, is that Iran is flexible and the United States is inflexible. It means that Iran will probably win this war, ultimately. But there has to be major changes to its society in order to win this war, right? So remember, to win a fight, you have to have three things: focus, clarity, and resolve. You have to know what your purpose is, you have to know how to achieve it, and you have to be determined to achieve it, okay? So what does this mean? First thing is focus means unity. Meaning that you have to unite your population, which means basically crushing all dissent. The second thing, clarity, is to censor people. Censorship. And we're already seeing that in Israel, where you're not allowed to film military strikes. Okay? If a drone comes and attacks Tel Aviv in Israel, you cannot film that and put on social media. Same thing in Dubai. You cannot show Dubai being attacked. Okay? So massive censorship going on. And resolve just means militarization, where the Middle East moves towards total war. Total war just means that every citizen now is recruited into the war effort. It just means that the entire economy is geared towards war. And one last point I'll make is this. What we need to understand about the escalation ladder is that as it moves up, we have to remember that this war is being fought multidimensionally. It means that the military is just one dimension, but there are four major dimensions. There are others, but let's focus on four major dimensions, okay? The first major dimension is narrative. Narrative is just basically world opinion. Second is political. Political just means the relationship of nations to each other. The relationship of the government to the people, okay? Political. The third dimension is economical. And the fourth is military. And what's really important to understand is that the military dimension is probably the least important. Therefore, these four factors determine how the United States and Iran move up the escalation ladder. Okay? Because your purpose is to control the narrative and justify why you're doing what you're doing. Political means you still have to maintain good relations with other states, right? So as the United States is fighting this war against Iran, the United States is still talking to China. The United States is still talking to Russia. Economic means that as this fight is still happening, nations are still trading with each other. And that factors into how the military is fought. So I know this is very complicated, but you need to understand how complicated war is. It's not as simple as saying, you know what, let's nuke that guy. It doesn't work that way. Okay? There are a lot of constraints, a lot of stakeholders involved to constrain the use of nukes. Let's now discuss ground troops. All right, the first question we look at is, will ground troops be used? And the answer, unfortunately, is yes, they have to be used. And it has to do with how the military works, okay? Of how wars are fought. Basically, when you fight a war, you have to have a correct cost pyramid. Infantry, soldiers, okay? They're at the bottom. Why? Because they're the cheapest. What's above them? Armor, okay? Artillery, tanks. They're more expensive to produce. You need more resources. You need more time. Then you have naval. Then you have air. And cost pyramid is this question of like, how much energy, how much time, how much resources do you need to produce a certain product, okay? It costs you very little to produce a soldier, but it costs you a lot to produce an airplane. And this is important because wars are usually wars of attrition, meaning that you have to put all your resources into winning the war, okay? So this is just production capacity. The problem is that the United States have an inverse pyramid, meaning that air is what's dominant, then naval, then armor, then soldiers. I mean, the moment you choose to fight a war like this, you've lost the war. Because you either take out the country in like 2 days, or you scoot over, but you cannot replenish your forces. 1991, the Persian Gulf War, 2003, the Iraq War, these are not real wars, okay? Because the Americans were so dominant and Iraq was so weak that it was basically a video game, all right? It was just these pilots flying around, just bombing everything, okay? It's like guys in tanks just running over the Iraqi army. But this Iran thing is a real war. And therefore, you cannot fight a war like this. If you want to win this war, the only thing you can do is return to a realistic cost pyramid, right? Because again, your cheapest product are soldiers. You cannot afford to lose an airplane in order to save a life of a soldier. Eventually, this cost-benefit analysis will blow up on you, okay? All right, so if the United States wants to win this war, then it has no choice but to use ground troops, to use soldiers as the main force of its military. Now the question then is, will the United States use ground troops? I already said that if the United States is to win this war, it has no choice but to use ground troops. But will the United States use ground troops? And a lot is determined by the game theory strategies of the different players, okay? So let's look at the four major players in this war. You have US, you have Israel, you have Saudi Arabia, and you have Iran. So the United States and Iran, they're pretty easy to understand. What the United States wants to do is destroy Iran, okay? Why? Because if we were to destroy Iran, the United States would have complete control over Middle East oil, and it would control global trade through the Strait of Hormuz. And therefore, the United States can maintain its empire, okay? So a really simple objective, let's destroy Iran. We don't care how, we don't care why, let's just go do it. Iran has another strategy, which is control Strait of Hormuz and destroy CENTCOM. CENTCOM is basically the American military in the Middle East, called Central Command, okay? So those are two major military objectives of Iran. And we can understand why. Because if CENTCOM is destroyed, Iran has complete control over the Middle East. Now, the new kid is now the bully of the Middle East, right? Now it's a hegemon. That is the political objective of this war. One other thing is humble Israel. And Israel is the great military power of the Middle East. So you want to humble them. You want to weaken them. You can't destroy Israel because Israel has nuclear weapons, right? You piss off Israel, those nukes start flying. You don't want that, right? So those are the three major political objectives for Iran, okay? If you are Israel, actually for you, the strategy is different. What you want to do is this. You want to destroy CENTCOM and destroy Iran. Why? Because if you destroy both the United States and you destroy Iran, then you are the sole hegemon in the Middle East, okay? Also destroy the GCC. Destroy Saudi Arabia as well. Why? Because once Saudi Arabia is destroyed, all its resources belong to you, okay? And this creates something called the Greater Israel Project, which is what we will discuss next class. But as you can see, that's really important, is that even though the United States and Israel are allies, their ultimate strategy is different. In fact, they're in conflict, okay? Then you have Saudi Arabia. What does Saudi Arabia want to do? Well, destroy Iran, because if you destroy Iran, you have complete control of the Strait of Hormuz. Then you can be the bully, okay? But you also want to destroy the US and you want to humble Israel. Right? So by understanding how each player perceives the game, we can now understand how they will go about their strategy. But as you can see, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Iran all want to destroy the United States. And how do you do that? You do that by forcing the United States into a long ground war. Therefore, if you're Israel, you don't want to use nukes. Why? Because nukes would end the war too quickly. You want to drag this war out as long as possible to force the United States to send in ground troops.